Takafumi learnt in the fall of 2017 that his uncle, who had been unconscious following a car accident 17 years prior, had awakened, and he went to meet him. As soon as he arrives, Takafumi's uncle begins speaking to him strangely, leading him to suspect that his uncle is suffering from mental injury. This suspicion is only confirmed when Takafumi's uncle says that he was happy to return after 17 years from the another world Granbahamal. Uncle finds out that the entire family is split up when he asks Takafumi what the other family members are doing. The fact that not even his sister wanted to interact with him caused Uncle to jot something down in a small notebook and chant Akura's Kyora after that. Uncle uses magic to try to convince Takafumi that he visited another world, but it first fails, to Takafumi's dismay. Then Takafumi tries to explain his financial difficulties and incapacity to support him when all of a sudden Uncle, speaking in Japanese, activates a wind magic, demonstrating his claims. When Takafumi notices this, he becomes elated and forgets his remarks about not being able to help his uncle. Uncle, in the meantime, questions Takafumi about the Sega position in the console wars. When he learns that Sega has left the console industry, he becomes upset and instantly writes it down in his small notepad before chanting Akura's Kyora. Takafumi becomes curious and inquires about Akura's Kyora, which Uncle explains to him is the memory erasure spell that he employs anytime he encounters something excruciating. Takafumi becomes curious and requests permission to read the notebook. After doing so, he quickly regrets it and requests that his uncle use Akura's Kyora on him. After being released from the hospital a week later, Uncle moves in with Takafumi in his apartment. In the meantime, Takafumi made the decision to capitalize on his uncle's abilities and began uploading videos of them on YouTube, which helped to bring in $60,000 in advertising revenue. Later, Uncle asks Takafumi why he chose to live alone, and he responds that initially he was in a room share arrangement, but things didn't work out. Uncle is shocked to learn the term room share, which he had never heard of, and assumes Takafumi was sharing a residence with a female. While comparing a smartphone to an electronic dictionary, Takafumi is startled to realize that room share didn't exist 17 years ago. Takafumi inquires about his comrades in the another world during the conversation with Uncle, who responds that he spent the majority of that time alone, 17 years, in the another world. The main factor is that everyone in that other world was attractive, whereas he was hunted down because he belonged to an orc subspecies. Uncle describes a specific guy who followed him around frequently, tormented him, and attacked and verbally abused him. Takafumi laments the fact that another fantasy world's games aren't any better. Uncle goes on to describe more about that person, including how the first time he saved her, she was really harsh to him, rather than expressing gratitude. Takafumi learns that the girl was a tsundere when Uncle talks more about her and recalls that the term tsundere didn't exist until 4 years after Uncle left on his voyage. Uncle expresses interest in purchasing a Turn model cell phone at an auction one day. As it uses an outdated 2G signal, Takafumi claims that it won't be used in accordance with current standards. Uncle, though, is not concerned because he won't be utilizing it because he has no one to call. Uncle is astonished by the variety of things a smartphone can accomplish, but he bemoans the device's lack of a gimmick. Uncle continues by saying that a lot has changed and advanced in 17 years. Then, using the spell Akura's Elrun, he recalled an occasion in which he invented a product in the other world. He had used magic cards to create a ever-brimming pot of water for a village that was experiencing a drought. The revelation impresses Takafumi, who compares it to the overpowered modern science trope and speculates that the people must have sung songs of adoration and thanks for Uncle. In actuality, however, the villagers had attempted to hang Uncle because they believed the object's shape to be sacrilegious and they had shattered it. Elf shows up to stop the villagers as they attempt to convert Uncle. Uncle seized the opportunity to flee while Elf was attempting to resolve the conflict. Uncle misunderstands Takafumi's frustration with the situation as a dislike for the first-person account of the incident. Uncle then shifts the perspective in his memories and demonstrates to Takafumi how he was handled. Takafumi inquires as to whether it is feasible to see what transpired with the elf. Uncle focuses on the background and notices the elf looking a little miffed that Uncle had fled. The peasants who attacked her are now being fibbed by her. Uncle quickly places an order after receiving a notification that the auction on his cell phone is about to end without first checking the delivery cost, which turns out to be 2,000 yen since the item was being sold by someone on a remote island. Takafumi regrets that, if the place had been closer, they could have picked it up in person to avoid paying shipping fees and took the experience as a lesson. Takafumi is shocked when Uncle abruptly leaps out of the window and takes off into the air. He returns from his journey 30 minutes later with the cell phone in hand. Takafumi asks Uncle if he could pick up a similar auction item after seeing it, and Uncle says yes. When Takafumi receives an Amazon delivery of rice, he asks his uncle to provide him something to break the box with. He is surprised when Uncle hands him a small sword, and he asks Uncle where it emerged out of nowhere. Uncle then displays to him his storage magic while removing his tiny notebook from it. He tries to pull out a magic sword, but instead strikes the wall, to Takafumi's dismay. Uncle then pulls out a ring that has a magically crystallized mermaid's tear put on a rainbow coral ring that can be sold for enough money to build a castle if it is uncommon enough. Takafumi was interested in selling the ring after hearing what was being said, but Uncle told him that he had already tried to sell it and set the price at 50 yen. Uncle begins to consider strategies for increasing his view count utilizing fresh ideas. After that, Uncle asks Takafumi if he wants to talk about love and tells Takafumi the tale of his first love, Sonic and Tails. Uncle makes me think of going to the toy section and admiring them while watching the title screen. When Takafumi inquires about his romantic relationships, Uncle responds that he once fell in love with Kidnanis, a human video game character. When Takafumi inquires about if Uncle ever encounters women in the other world, Uncle agrees and displays the memory of him rescuing a girl and her siblings from an orc. In spite of her initial gratitude, the girl gradually overcomes her dejection upon seeing Uncle and resolves to give herself over to him in order to preserve her siblings' lives. Uncle misread the scenario and believed the girl to be grateful and glad for him, but he then loses consciousness and believes a goblin may have assaulted him from behind and thrown him into the river without his knowledge. Takafumi wondered whether it wasn't a goblin attack, but rather a sibling attacking Uncle from behind after noticing in the memory that the girl's siblings were acting suspiciously while attempting to get behind Uncle. Later, to express his gratitude to the elf, Uncle forcibly places a ring on her finger that he later removes and sells for cash, much to the annoyance of the elf. Takafumi respects the elf girl's persistence. On a soggy day, Takafumi tells the story of his uncle's decision to quit utilizing online auctioning after the recent fall in the number of views on his Ojisan's films. He then goes on to say that he recently won a magazine that listed the outcome of the Sega Saturn reader's vote. He didn't get a chance to read it before being transferred to the other world, but Takafumi doesn't care. Since a PC-ported Bishoujo game wins the competition, the results are unexpected. Ojisan declares that Guardian Heroes should have won after reading this while hovering outside in the pouring rain and getting struck by lightning. Then he launches into a rant about the game's amazing quality and where it stands on the list of best games. After the rain stops, Takafumi gives Ojisan some coffee while comforting him over the fact that a Sega Saturn RPG came in second. He soon discovers that Ojisan didn't play RPGs because of his poor remembering of the game's rules. The mention of RPGs causes Ojisan to recall an incident that made him think of an encounter he had while playing an RPG in the other world. Ojisan reveals Takafumi a recollection of a fight he had with a village elder who labeled him an orc while casting Akura's Elrun. He then finds out that nearby village's legendary dragon of the fire shrine has been roused. The magical ice sword from the Ice Clan is required to slay the dragon, but the clan's descendant is a rambunctious outlaw named Mabel. She tells Ojisan about a specific flower that her mother once showed her when they first met Mabel. The dragon is then killed by Ojisan without the use of the swords after he departs and arrives at the fire temple. Takafumi notes that Ojisan should have gone and gotten the flowers for Mabel in response to this, but Ojisan says it would be too difficult for him to remember. A package containing a Sega Saturn and 20 games for it is delivered when the doorbell rings. Ojisan was supposed to get it as a surprise, but after his recent outburst about the ranking and their reduced budget, he is reluctant to do so. Takafumi is unable to distinguish between Ojisan's surprise and anger from his expression. Takafumi then says that he has guardian heroes to ease the stress, and Ojisan who is overjoyed, asks if he wants to play. The game is then played jointly by the two. After returning from a shopping trip, Ajisan tells Takafumi that the nighttime ambience in the city reminds him of the video game Alien Storm. Takafumi becomes intrigued by the fact that it also makes Ajisan think of New Year's Eve in the other world. Soon after, Ajisan finds that Kachikam, his favorite television show, is no longer on the air, so he asks Sakura's Elrun to have Takafumi see his recollection of a New Year's Eve party. Ajisan was shunned by everyone and ate alone despite the fact that everyone was having a great time and was cheerful. The memories eventually came to an end as he went back to his room for the evening. Takafumi inquires as to if the elf appeared after that, to which he replies that nothing else occurred. Takafumi asks Ajisan apathetically whether he wants to play any Sega Saturn games with him, and Ajisan enthusiastically accepts. Takafumi turns off the gaming system and insists on seeing what transpired during Mabel's visit after Ajisan admits that she did visit him that night during their game session. Ajisan asks Takafumi how to stop being a coward while recalling Mabel, who had the ice sword on her person, and casting Akura's Elrun once more. Ajisan gives Mabel a motivational speech after learning that the village elder told her that, yet, when he discovers that she is a hermit, he encourages that she continued to be such. Mabel offers her the ice sword, but he denies it, and the memory comes to an end. Takafumi asks Ajisan if he played computer games on New Year's Eve when he was a teenager, but he responds that he watched the comedy program It's Okay to Laugh at the time. Ajisan is shocked to find that the program finished 3 years ago and a year before the current one, Kachikam, and that it has since terminated. They talked about games and ate soba until the new year arrived as they carried on their conversation throughout the night. On the first day of the new year, Fujimiya receives a creepy compliment from Ajisan. Then Takafumi comes over and says they have been buddies since middle school. After a brief conversation, Takafumi invites Fujimiya to visit him at his home. Fujimiya accepts the invitation and says she will arrive after dropping off her groceries. A text message from Takafumi stating that he is out obtaining snacks but will return home shortly is received by Fujimiya 30 minutes after his arrival. Ajisan shows up shortly after Fujimiya enters the scene, and he then tries to delete what she witnessed from her memory. Takafumi intervenes and tells him that she is his buddy, stopping him. Hearing this, Ajisan approaches Fujimiya and expresses his gratitude for being Takafumi's friend. Following that, Ajisan and Takafumi inform Fujimiya of Ajisan's history and status as a YouTuber. Then Fujimiya says that Ajisan should live his own life and abandon Takafumi's life, from which Ajisan infers that she loves Takafumi. Takafumi insists that they are only friends, despite her denials, but Ajisan doesn't believe her because he says he has watched the entire Neon Genesis Evangelion series. He watched it only because Sega sponsored it, even if everyone did back in the day. Then Takafumi understands that Ajisan will come to understand that the elf was in reality in love with him. Ajisan, on the other hand, uses a few Eva figures to illustrate the bond between Takafumi and Fujimiya. Ajisan quickly reads Fujimiya's thinking and what she did before she got there, after making her cry with a narrative about a video game character. As Ajisan answers the doorbell, Fujimiya asks who he is and prevents him from answering by calling for the package delivery man. When Takafumi assumes that Fujimiya is referring to them becoming housemates, she clarifies that this is not the case and advises Takafumi to terminate her ties with Ajisan. The delivery turned out to be 15 kilograms of rice, and both the package man and Fujimiya were extremely irate for various reasons. One more individual is now aware of Ajisan's secret. Subscribe to the channel for part 2 and more animerecaps.